All right, guys, what's going on? We got the Ranger flag up today, so you know what that means. We're going to be talking about Ranger School. For this video, I wanted to use a resource that I found at ARTB's website, at the Fort Moore website. It's an overall, all-encompassing Ranger School information brief, and it looks like it's supposed to be delivered in a formal setting. But I wanted to be able to go through this presentation slide by slide and then give to you a little bit more insight about the information that you'll find on the slides. Coming from somebody who's been through the school themselves and still to this day continues to resource the information so that I can give you the most up-to-date and current information plus motivation for you if you intend on going to Ranger School yourself in the future. And if you are one of those soldiers, I want to say good on you for researching as much information as you possibly can in regard to Ranger School. It tells me that you're definitely doing that if you found yourself on this video right now. I applaud your dedication, and I want to encourage you to continue that dedication as you make your way and your journey to Ranger School and all the way till completion to the day where you finally get your tab. And for you guys that are just doing a little bit of research, if you're kind of on the fence on whether or not to go to Ranger School in general, I would highly advise, definitely recommend going and completing Ranger School. Not only is it going to make you a more competent and confident leader, but it's going to work wonders for your career, and it's really just going to make you a better person overall. Highly recommend you go and get your tab. But with all that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive into this brief. Please do not forget, take this opportunity to like and subscribe to this video. Not only does it help this channel immensely when you do that, but it shows me that you actually like the information that I'm pushing out, so it motivates me to make more of this type of information. But it's also going to make sure that you don't miss any videos that I push out in the future. We talk about all sorts of things on this channel that anybody who has any inclination or interest in going to Ranger School, all the information on this channel is going to benefit you in one way or the other. And not to mention, this is probably the best channel out there on YouTube that you're going to find for information regarding Ranger School. All right, so don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's go ahead and get into this brief. All right, guys, so here's the first slide. And again, this is the official slide deck that you can find at ARTB's website, on the Fort Moore website. It is under the Ranger School tab, and then there is a link that's called Ranger School Information, and that will take you to this brief. I would highly advise that for Ranger School, or really any school that you're planning on going to in the Army, that you definitely check out and get all of your information, your official information, from the school's website itself. Don't just depend on your buddies. Don't just depend on YouTube to get all your information to get ready for Army schools. You really want to get your information from the most trusted source, and that's going to be the school itself. And if you're not sure where ARTB's website is, I will drop that link in the description of this video so that you have that resource available to you at home. But again, here's the first slide. Again, it's the official brief. I'm going to power through the agenda and also the mission and purpose. This isn't super relevant to you as a student, but the first slide that is this slide. Now, this is just an overall snapshot of what Ranger School is, all right? You can see it is meant to be about a 61-day course, all right? Wouldn't plan on it being 61 days, okay? But if you were to go from start to finish and didn't have to recycle a thing, you'd be there for 61 to 62 days, all right? Now, the first portion of Ranger School is called RAP Week, or Ranger Assessment Phase. And this really isn't a whole week. It's more like 4 to 5 days of just back-to-back testing that's really assessing whether or not you came to Ranger School prepared and that you have the physical fitness and the competence already that is required to get you through the course and eventually see you through to graduation. Now, again, during this 4 to 5 days, this is just a series of back-to-back testing designed to make sure that you actually have what it takes to get through the school. It's during RAP Week where you're going to see the majority of cuts from Ranger School itself. I want to say it's around 60 to 65% fail rate from RAP Week itself. The first 4 to 5 days of Ranger School, over 60% of those who are in attendance of that class fail during RAP Week. Now, during RAP Week, here are the main events. There's going to be some other things that are sprinkled through here, like combatives and the Malvesti obstacle course, things like that. There will be a lot more than you just see on this list, but the big go, no-go events are these as listed, and that's the Ranger Physical Assessment, CWSA, the Combat Water Survival Assessment, Land Nav, RTTs, and the 12-mile foot march. Now, we're going to dive a little bit further into RAP Week a little later into this brief, but that's your basic overview. That's the basic events. Now, the overall training highlights of Ranger School itself, like I said before, it's meant to be a 61-day course, all right? But for most, it's not going to be that short. So don't go there expecting it to be 61 days. Don't plan it that way. I would plan it to be more like 3 to 6 months, something like that. but I've known guys that have been there for upwards of 12 months at Ranger School. All right, so anything is possible. Just keep that in mind. During those 61 days, you will spend 51 days in the field. You're seeing it here from the horse's mouth. All those guys that are talking to you about Ranger School, they're not lying to you. You'll conduct basic mountaineering operations. They call it basic here. I would definitely say that they definitely go into more advanced mountaineering operations once you get into mountain phase. You actually do learn quite a bit in mountain phase, and that's why I think mountain phase was really where I learned the most at Ranger School, and it was honestly the most fun, even though it sucked the most as well. There's 2 obstacle courses. All right, the first one you will conduct during Rap Week, and that's the Malvesti obstacle course. And then the second one will be during the first portion of Derby phase, which is immediately following Rap Week, and that's the Derby Queen. Malvesti is really just a smoke fest. That's all it is. And Derby Queen is actually quite difficult, okay? That is a point of failure for some Ranger students, or at least earning a few minors because they couldn't pass some of the obstacles. You definitely have to be physically fit and flexible and somewhat fearless to get through that obstacle course the way it's intended. There are 3 scheduled airborne operations. That doesn't mean that you're definitely going to get 3 in. It just means that they will try to infill you to each individual phase through an airborne insertion. And if you're not airborne qualified, you'll just bust there. There's 4 air assaults. That means there's 4 air assault missions where you'll come in using a Black Hawk helicopter, and 4 total boat movements, and that's all going to happen during Florida phase. ARTB assesses that there's 3 main categories of high-risk training, and that's airborne operations for obvious reasons. Training in and on water, that's going to consist of not only the boat maneuvers and movements, but also river crossings and taking into consideration the weather. There are times when it is freezing cold outside and they're still going to have you move through that water. All right, they're going to have you move through the swamps. They're going to have you cross rivers, and not to mention the CWSA during Rap Week. There is some risk involved with that as well. And then, of course, you have demolitions, all right? So you're not going to get a whole lot of real demolition knowledge, but you will actually do a demolitions pit during the first week or so. And then throughout the course, you will carry and execute some small level demolition charges during your missions. You can expect to see about 3,400 Ranger School students per year with 11 courses per year. And the average pass rate during the year is anywhere between 45 to 60% depending on the class. And that's all the way from start to finish. That includes Rap Week. And this is a big bullet right here. Ranger students are expected to conduct a passing patrol, be in good standing with their peers, and have no major negative infractions in order to pass each phase. Those are the big 3 things that are going to get you through Ranger School. You have to pass patrols, at least 1 patrol. You have to pass peers. You can't get peered out. And you cannot have any negative infractions, right? And negative infractions can be a whole lot of things. They can be major safety violations. They can be ethical violations. Maybe you stole somebody's MRE, which definitely happens if you didn't know that already. Things like that. Things that are just going to be spot reports that just get you kicked out because you deserve to get kicked out. All right, here's an overview, again, straight from ARTB, of the course imposed stress. The reason why this slide is important is because the whole point of Ranger School is to force you to be able to execute a successful mission, a successful objective under a high amount of stress. Ranger School is doing its very best to simulate combat operations. And it does a very good job, guys. You know, I've been to Ranger School and I've been shot at, and I can tell you they're both extremely stressful. They're not the same, but they're both extremely stressful in their own way. Now here's how Ranger School imposes stress. Prolonged low-intensity physical activity, you can expect to be carrying anywhere between 65 to 90 pounds of combat equipment on any given day. And that is not a lie, guys. I remember there was a day during Derby where the RI heard another Ranger School student complaining about how heavy the pack was. So this RI, he took a student's empty ruck, grabbed items that were part of the packing list that they had given to us for that phase, and mind you, this was during the winter, so it was the heavy packing list, and packed out the entire ruck. He called it a rucksack packing class, but really he was just trying to show us that it's not as heavy as the Ranger School student was saying it was. By the end, everything was packed up, and he weighed it with a fishhook scale, and it came out to be a little over 90 pounds. It was like 91 or 92 pounds. And you can see the look on that RI's face kind of drop a little bit because he had realized, oh shit, these Ranger students are right. But do you think it mattered? Do you think it made any difference? Nope, not at all. He said, drive on, Rangers. That's the packing list. Nothing I could do about it. So it really didn't matter, but it definitely solidified and gave us solace in knowing that we were absolutely carrying around 90 pounds of gear on our backs every day. You'll also conduct over 200 miles of tactical foot movements, and that's throughout the entire course. You know, there'll be some days where it's really not that bad. Maybe you'll only move 4 to 6 miles. There'll be some days where you move anywhere between 10 to 15 miles. It really all just depends on the missions. It depends on the day. But overall, it's over 200 miles for the entire course, and I love how they just leave that to interpretation. I mean, over 200 miles can be any number. So at least 200 miles. Sleep deprivation. 0 to 5 hours of sleep a night. That's no joke. There's plenty of nights where you will get 0 hours of sleep. You just won't sleep. There will be days when you do not sleep. And I wouldn't expect, 5 hours seems like a lot. I wouldn't expect to get anything more than 4 hours of sleep. 4 hours was like a gift from God. I remember most nights, if I got anywhere near 3 or more, I felt like, oh man, tonight's going to be a glorious night. And that's really what you can expect, guys. You're going to be tired as hell the entire time you go through Ranger School. Just like ridiculously tired, more tired than you've ever been. Food consumption, they're going to give you 2 MREs per day, all right? And they're going to dictate when and where you can eat it and how long you can eat it for. And if it's anything like they were doing for when I went through, it's 5 minutes to finish your MRE. There'll be some days where they'll be a little bit more nice to you and they'll give you 10 minutes. And maybe if your airborne operation gets canceled, they'll give you an MRE on the bus and you can just eat it at your leisure. And that, I can tell you also, is an amazing feeling. But you'll get 2,200 calories a day on or around. And that sounds, like it might be enough. But when you're out there just constantly conducting patrols, doing at least 200 miles total, 2,200 calories dries up really quick during the day. All right, so you will definitely lose weight and you will definitely be hungry during Ranger School. I promise you that. Environmental impacts. Darby phase is all done right next to Fort Benning, so you can expect, kind of like a hilly, woodsy environment. Mountains phase is in Dahlonega, and it's definitely mountains, okay? It's going to be a lot of incline climbing, a lot of steep cliffs, heavy foliage, and it really is just going to suck the entire time. Just expect that, especially if you go in the winter, because it's going to be just snowing on you day to day. And if it's not snowing, it's sleeting or it's raining and cold at the same time. And swamp phase, that happens down in the panhandle of Florida. All right, so it's going to be swampy, but it can still be extremely cold during the winter, and obviously it's going to be very hot during the summer. All right, so but swamp phase is exactly what you think it is. You're just trudging through the swamps the entire time out there while you're out there at Florida phase. All right, evaluated leadership positions. Now, this is a little misleading because it says you should get 2 patrols per phase. Now, that's not exactly true. I think that's kind of like the ideal scenario, that you get 2 patrols per phase, because that gives you a little wiggle room. If you get a no-go for your first patrol, then you get a second chance, all right? But sometimes during these phases, if it's like a class that has more than usual of Ranger School students, then you're only going to get 1 patrol, and you just got to hope that that's a go for you. But the other side of the coin is maybe you only get 1 patrol and then it's already a go, and they know that, so they just don't bother with you anymore, and they pocket that extra time for somebody that might need 3 looks to get their go on patrols. But the moral of the story is, don't go there just expecting that you're going to get 2 looks on your patrols, because it's not necessarily a guarantee. And you won't necessarily know if you're a go or a no-go after your first or even second patrol. And that's why every look that you get for your patrols during Ranger School it has to be your go look. That's how you have to mentally think about it. This has to be the one, because you might not get another one. Post-phase peer evaluations, honestly, there's not a whole lot to talk about this. Just don't be a turd. Be a team player. Pull security when you're supposed to pull security. Help leadership positions get their goes, and just be a good Ranger, buddy, and you're going to have no issues with peer evaluations, all right? some advice on that real quick. I would say bring your team together, whether you're in squads or platoons at the time, bring your team together and have like a daily check-in where you just do a round robin and just literally tell everybody face to face how everybody's doing and where they could do better. And that way there's no surprises at the end, because it's not like somebody has to get peered out. That's not how it works. Everybody can move on to the next phase. But that's enough said on that one. And lastly, we have constant opposition force probing. And that just means that you are constantly, when you're out in the field, you're constantly on alert for enemy forces. Just like you would be in combat. You know, you're constantly on guard and you're constantly ready to react to that contact if it ever comes to you, and it's the environment that they put you in, it's just constantly a threat. But like I said, the end state here is if you can get through all this and you're successful and you do earn your tab, then it creates mentally and physically resilient, resourceful leaders. And I definitely agree with that. All right, guys, now here's your graduation rate comparison for fiscal year 22. Now this includes all the classes, and remember there was 11 classes total for the fiscal year 2022. Now looking at this, they've broken it down to the 2022 stats, including RAP events, and then they've moved on and said, here's the stats if you were not to include RAP events. Now, what I see as the takeaway for why they've divided it this way is because they're really saying, hey, look, if you show up here not prepared, or you are barely prepared or kind of borderline, this is your chances of graduation, 44.8%, less than 50%. If you show up physically prepared and competent enough to get through RTTs, your chance at graduation is 65.3%. And that's the importance of being physically prepared when you show up to Ranger School. And I will take this opportunity to remind you that you will find the best Ranger School fitness program at grittysoldier.com. If you're looking for a way to make sure to take the guesswork out of all your training and make sure that you're actually physically prepared to show up to Ranger School, the program, the 13-week Ranger School fitness program that you can find at grittysoldier.com is the way to go. I will put the link in the description for you guys. And read the reviews, guys. Those are reviews from real people who have gone through that program, gotten their tabs, and they've got nothing but good things to say, all right? Definitely go check out that program. Can't stress it enough. But anyway, let's talk about this side. We're going to talk about the 2022 stats with RAP events, all right? So they've broken it down to the individual RAP events that we briefly went over earlier, right? And you can see that the RPA has the highest fail rate of 17.96%. And that's for obvious reasons, right? Obviously, those soldiers that showed up to Ranger School and failed the RPA were not in the right shape to even be there in the first place. Because I can tell you, if you cannot pass the RPA with flying colors, then you have no business going through the rest of Ranger School. If you're not sure what the RPA is, as of today, the last day of November 2023, it is still the RPFT. It's that 49 minimum push-ups, 59 minimum sit-ups, a 5-mile run in 40 minutes or less, and at least 6 dead hang chin-ups. Real quick, I'll hit on this just for your awareness. If you haven't been paying attention to the news with ARTB, or if you haven't been watching this channel for the last couple months, you might not know this, but they are looking at changing the RPA to a totally different standard than what it is today. But they have not set a guaranteed date of when that will be implemented. As of now, it's still the RPFT like I just described, but I would highly advise that you go check out the information of what they're looking at changing the RPA to. I'll drop a link to a video where I talk about that in the description. I'll also put a little card right here. But yeah, guys, this is on day 2 after the first day of in-processing, and this is almost a 20% fail rate right off the bat. That's ridiculous in my opinion. You should be able to pass the RPA, but that just goes to show you, if you show up physically prepared, your chances of getting through RAP week increase exponentially. All right, next on the list is RTTs, that's Ranger Tactical Tasks, and this really comes down, this is a test of competence, all right? These are things like assembling and disassembling weapon systems. You're going to have to set up a claymore to standard. You're going to have to show that you are able to operate a dagger to standard, things like that. Now, for this, you definitely want to get your hands on this equipment before you show up to Ranger School, and you want to definitely know that in your mind that you can handle the RTTs to standard. I'll tell you, they will give you a little bit of time to get some hands-on practice, but it's really just for warm-up right before it's time for you to actually go up and test, all right? So that's not the time to be learning. That's just the time to get maybe like a rep in before you go in and actually test. Next is LandNav. Now, I do have a video on how to be successful on LandNav. It goes into pretty good detail with LandNav at Ranger School. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. I think that's enough said on this video about LandNav, but you can see it's a little over 6% drop rate throughout the year at Rap Week. Then you have the 12-mile foot march, which is still a pretty high number of 5%, a little over 5%. Now, things to consider with the foot march is a 12-mile foot march, and it is at the very last day of Rap Week. So your legs are dog shit tired by the time you go to execute the 12-mile ruck march. And that's why I always say that you should show up to Ranger School already able to execute a 12-mile foot march with a 35-pound pack dry in about 2 hours and 30 minutes. It's not flat. It's definitely got inclines and declines, and you're just going to be exhausted by the time you get to that event, all right? So, like I said, 2 hours and 30 minutes is the standard you need to set for yourself before you're even showing up to Ranger School. You have admin drops. I'm not going to get too much into that, but that's usually, something like a medical drop. You get hurt, or maybe you had a Red Cross message or something like that. Something that's just more or less out of your control, all right? That's a pretty low number, so not something to stress about. And then you have the CWSA. That's the Combat Water Survival Assessment. That's around a 1% drop. And that's really just because, honestly, guys, if you're able to swim even just a little bit, you're not going to have any issues with CWSA. Now, if you're somebody who can't swim, you're going to fall into that 1%. All right, guys, now real quick, we're almost done. We're going to wrap this up. Let's go ahead and get into the remainder of the phases. So this is after Rap Week. What are the biggest things that are going to get you during the remainder of Ranger School? This accounts for all the phases. It's Darby, Mountains, and Swamp phase. You get a little over 6% for patrols. Again, I'll remind you, always assume that the patrol that you're on, even if it's your first patrol, is your last patrol, so it has to be a go. LOM is loss of motivation. Now, I think the majority here, what that means is Rangers are quitting, or they are just performing so poorly that the RIs pulled them off. And you can see that's a pretty low number. Most Rangers will not quit because they just know that they're going to hate themselves later if they do, or they're just too embarrassed to quit in front of their Ranger buddies. Med drops is pretty high, about 7%. If you're not training properly, then you will not have built up that endurance that's required to take the beatings that come throughout the majority of Ranger School, and you're going to be lacking in muscle and bone density that's going to be required to actually get you through all the challenges that you're going to see during the school. So a lot of this med drop, I know, could have been prevented through proper training. But obviously, there's going to be some things that just happen, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're just going to heal up and come back to school. This says patrols and peers at 7.41%. I can only assume that what they're lumping in both of them together, and if that's the case, then there's only a 1% fail rate for peers. But that doesn't sound right to me, okay? This might be just peers, all right? Because there's definitely dudes and dudettes that get peered out, no doubt about it, all right? It definitely happens. And not everybody just gets a free pass. If you don't perform well, or if you are a turd in any way during Ranger School and you rub your Ranger buddies the wrong way, they're going to peer you out, all right? You're not going to be able to be the gray man during Ranger School. You got to remember that earning your Ranger tab is not an individual event. It is a group effort. You don't earn your Ranger tab. Your buddies earn you your Ranger tab. SORs, all right, that's serious observation reports. So that's going to be like major safety violations, or like I mentioned before, maybe it's an ethical violation, like you stole somebody's MRE. There's always an MRE thief in Ranger School, guys, I promise you that. Now, I'll tell you, the reason why this number is so high is just because you're so tired and out of it during the majority of Ranger School that you might accidentally incur a safety violation. For example, like a negligent discharge, something like that. That's going to get you a one-way ticket right out of Ranger School. No ifs, ands, or buts. Really, it's going to be anything that directly endangers your Ranger buddies or yourself is definitely going to get you an SOR. But overall, you can see that there's nothing that's super high on here. Everything's pretty even, especially those big three things that we talked about, which is patrols, peers, and safety violations. Those all match up pretty evenly, right? So again, the main takeaways is get your patrol done, get your go, take it seriously, don't play around. Make sure you're a good team player. Don't be a turd. Take security seriously and do what you're supposed to do to help those in leadership positions get their goes, and be safe. Really pay attention to what you're doing. Do things right. Don't take shortcuts. and don't put anybody in danger when it's not necessary. If you do those three things, you should be within this 65.3 graduation rate. All right, guys, now there's also a complete day-to-day schedule of Ranger School included in this brief, but because I feel like this video is starting to get kind of long, I'm gonna go ahead and make a separate video of those slides and just go through those days so I can do it justice and be able to talk on the individual days for that video as well. Because I really do want to bring as much value to you as possible, and I don't want to burn you out with this video alone. But overall, guys, you can see even just from those few slides alone that passing Ranger School, it is going to be hard, but it's definitely not impossible. And your chances of being successful at Ranger School are going to increase exponentially as long as you just show up prepared. And that is the one thing that you can definitely control. There's going to be a lot of things that you cannot control at Ranger School while you're going through it, but you can absolutely control how prepared you are before you arrive. The course is literally designed to break you down starting from day one all the way till you finish school. You're just constantly getting broken down. So the better prepared you are when you show up, the longer that you're going to be able to handle that breakdown. Most Ranger School graduates do not make it through without recycling. They even say, the RIs will even say this, that you're not a real Ranger unless you've recycled the school at least once. And I agree with that because I believe that there are a lot of lessons that you can learn from failure, especially when it comes to Ranger School. And if you can learn from those lessons and still move on to eventual success, then you're just going to be that much better for it. So don't stress about recycling. Just expect it. It's probably going to happen to you. Don't freak out about it. Just get through it. If you're somebody who's watching this that's already failed Ranger School and is looking to go back, get motivated, get disciplined. You know what you got to do. Go back and crush it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, especially now, so you don't miss that next future video. If you guys have any information on Ranger School that you want to share with the community, please do that. Drop it in the comments. If you have any additional questions, I do check those comments, so please drop that in the comments as well. The more information that we have in there, the better. Remember, this information is supposed to be useful for anybody that watches this, so again, please don't hesitate to drop any information you might have for the community in the comments below. But for now, I actually got some brand new garage gym equipment that I'm really looking forward to testing out today. So I'm gonna go ahead and make my way downstairs to the Gritty Gym. Still gotta get mine in, you know what I'm saying? So again, I hope that information was useful to you. So besides that, I've got nothing else for you, and I'll see you on the next one.